January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. Oberst Heinrich Müller lowered his binoculars with an expression mixing disbelief and contempt. Through the swirling smoke of burning vehicles and exploding artillery shells, he observed a solitary American soldier climbing onto a disabled M10 tank destroyer that was already ablaze. The man appeared absurdly small even at this distance, perhaps 165 centimeters tall, weighing no more than 60 kilograms. His uniform hung loosely on a frame that seemed better suited to a teenager than a combat soldier. Müller turned to his executive officer with a sardonic smile. "The Americans are so desperate they send children to fight us now," he remarked, his voice carrying the confidence of a veteran who had survived 4 years of Eastern Front combat. "This one has climbed onto a burning vehicle. He will be dead in moments, either from our fire or from the flames." What Oberst Müller witnessed in the next hour would shatter every assumption he held about courage, firepower, and the relationship between physical size and combat effectiveness. The small American soldier, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, was about to deliver a masterclass in individual combat that would become legendary even among enemy forces. Standing exposed atop the burning tank destroyer, Murphy would single-handedly hold off an entire German company reinforced with 6 Panzer tanks, killing or wounding approximately 50 enemy soldiers while wounded himself, demonstrating that in warfare, heart matters infinitely more than height. The story of how the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II was nearly rejected from military service 5 separate times because he was too small reveals a persistent human tendency to judge capability by appearance rather than character. Audie Murphy's journey from impoverished Texas sharecropper's son to Congressional Medal of Honor recipient represents the quintessential American combat narrative, proving that courage cannot be measured in centimeters or kilograms, but only through actions under fire. Audie Murphy was born June 20th, 1925, in Kingston, Texas, the 7th of 12 children in a family so poor that adequate nutrition was a luxury they rarely experienced. His father Emmett abandoned the family when Audie was young, leaving his mother Josie to raise the children alone during the depths of the Great Depression. The Murphy children worked in cotton fields alongside their mother, each child expected to contribute to family survival from the moment they could walk. Audie dropped out of school after 5th grade, not from lack of intelligence, but from the brutal necessity of earning money to prevent starvation. By age 16, Audie was the primary provider for his younger siblings after his mother died in 1941. He picked cotton, worked odd jobs, and hunted game in the East Texas forest to feed his brothers and sisters. The hunting developed marksmanship skills that would later prove decisive in combat. Murphy could drop a rabbit at 50 meters with a borrowed .22 rifle, making every shot count because ammunition cost money the family didn't possess. This early training in precision shooting under pressure, where missing meant his siblings went hungry, created reflexes and accuracy that no amount of military training could replicate. When Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Audie Murphy was 16 years old, undersized even by standards of that era, standing 165 centimeters and weighing perhaps 55 kilograms. He immediately attempted to enlist in the Marine Corps, driven by patriotic fury and the honest recognition that military service offered regular meals and steady pay he could send to his siblings. The Marine recruiter took one look at Murphy's slight frame and boyish face and rejected him without even conducting a physical examination. "Come back when you've grown up, son," the recruiter told him, dismissing Murphy's protest that he was old enough and willing to fight. Undeterred, Murphy tried the Navy, again rejected for being underweight and looking too young. He attempted to join the Army Air Corps, dreaming of becoming a pilot. The recruiter laughed at him, suggesting he needed to gain at least 15 kilograms before they could consider his application. Murphy even tried the paratroopers, believing that a lighter soldier might be advantageous for airborne operations. The recruitment officer shook his head, explaining that paratroopers needed to be physically robust to survive the landing impact and immediate combat that followed airborne insertion. Finally, on his 5th attempt in June 1942, just after his 17th birthday, Murphy convinced his sister to falsify his birth certificate, making him appear 18. He had gained perhaps 3 kilograms through deliberately overeating what little food he could afford. The Army recruiter who finally accepted him did so reluctantly, noting in the file that Private Murphy appeared unlikely to meet the physical demands of infantry combat. The recruiter suggested assignment to a clerical unit, something behind the lines where Murphy's small stature wouldn't be a liability. Murphy refused, insisting on combat infantry. He wanted to fight, not type. The rejection Murphy experienced before entering service and the skepticism that greeted him during basic training reflected widespread assumptions about physical requirements for combat effectiveness that would be systematically demolished by Murphy's subsequent combat record. His drill sergeants at Camp Wolters, Texas, initially tried to transfer him to a support unit, believing he would be a liability to any infantry company unlucky enough to receive him. Murphy's determination and emerging talent changed their minds. During basic training, Murphy's marksmanship scores were so exceptional that instructors initially suspected equipment malfunction. He consistently qualified expert with every weapon, achieving accuracy that even career soldiers rarely matched. His slight build proved advantageous in combat maneuvers requiring speed and endurance rather than raw strength. While larger soldiers struggled under the weight of full combat gear during forced marches, Murphy's lighter frame adapted more efficiently to the burden. What he lacked in mass, he compensated through determination that bordered on obsession. Murphy shipped overseas in February 1943 with Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. The 3rd Division, nicknamed the Rock of the Marne for its World War I service, would conduct more days of combat than any other American division in the European theater. Murphy would participate in campaigns across Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany, witnessing combat that would have broken stronger-looking men, while the small Texan not only survived but excelled. His first combat experience came during the Sicily invasion in July 1943. At Palermo, Murphy killed his first enemy soldiers, 2 Italian officers attempting to escape on horseback. The experience affected him profoundly, not through hesitation but through the recognition that he was naturally gifted at combat. Where other soldiers froze under fire, Murphy's mind accelerated, processing tactical information with clarity that seemed supernatural. He could identify threats, calculate distances, and engage targets with precision while incoming fire struck around him. This combat clarity would become his defining characteristic. During the Italian campaign, Murphy's reputation grew among both American and German forces. At Anzio, one of the war's bloodiest battles, Murphy held an exposed position for over an hour, picking off German soldiers attempting to overrun American lines. His company commander noted in after-action reports that Murphy appears immune to fear and possesses almost supernatural aim under fire. German prisoners interrogated after the battle reported that their officers had warned them about their kleine Texaner, the little Texan, a small American who fought like a demon and never missed. The battle that would earn Murphy his first Distinguished Service Cross occurred near Ramatuelle, France, in August 1944. His best friend Laddie Tipton was killed by German snipers, an event that unleashed something dark in Murphy's combat personality. He single-handedly assaulted the German position that killed Tipton, killing 6 enemy soldiers and capturing 2 more. Witnesses reported that Murphy advanced directly into German machine gun fire, seemingly oblivious to the bullets striking around him, methodically killing every German soldier he encountered. When officers reached his position, they found Murphy sitting calmly, weapon empty, surrounded by dead German soldiers, with no apparent awareness of the extraordinary courage he had just demonstrated. This pattern repeated throughout Murphy's combat service. Situations that paralyzed normal soldiers through fear activated something in Murphy that a psychiatrist would later describe as combat dissociation combined with hypervigilance. Under fire, Murphy's pulse actually decreased rather than increasing. His vision narrowed to targets. Time seemed to slow. He could hear individual bullets passing near his head and instinctively moved to avoid them. These reactions, which would later be recognized as symptoms of what warriors throughout history experienced, made Murphy extraordinarily effective in combat, while ensuring he would never fully escape the war's psychological consequences. By January 1945, 2nd Lieutenant Murphy commanded Company B after most of its officers had been killed or wounded. He had already earned 1 Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. German intelligence had identified him as a particular threat, with captured documents specifically warning of a small American officer named Murphy, who appears fearless and is an exceptional marksman. The Germans had learned through painful experience to take Murphy seriously regardless of his appearance. The Battle of Holtzwihr would cement Murphy's legend while revealing the extent of his tactical genius and personal courage. Company B had been tasked with holding a position near the Colmar Pocket, a German salient in eastern France that Hitler had ordered defended at all costs. The position was fundamentally weak, exposed across open ground with minimal cover. Murphy had 128 men, 2 M10 tank destroyers, and artillery support from the rear. Against him, German forces were massing 6 Panzer tanks and approximately 250 infantry for a counterattack designed to break through American lines. The attack began at 1,400 hours on January 26 with German artillery striking American positions. Murphy's defensive line began taking casualties immediately. The 2 M10 tank destroyers attempted to engage the approaching Panzers, but one was destroyed by a direct hit, killing its entire crew. The second M10 was struck by armor-piercing rounds that set ablaze, forcing its crew to abandon the vehicle. The burning tank destroyer sat in the middle of Murphy's defensive line, its machine gun ammunition beginning to cook off in the heat, sending stray rounds in random directions. Murphy ordered most of his company to fall back to a secondary position in nearby woods, recognizing that remaining in the exposed forward position meant certain death for his entire unit. He stayed forward with his radio operator to direct artillery fire onto the advancing Germans. When his radio operator was killed by German machine gun fire, Murphy was left completely alone in the forward position with a field telephone connected to artillery batteries several kilometers to the rear. This was the moment when Oberst Müller observed a small American soldier climbing onto the burning M10. What Müller couldn't know was that Murphy had made an instantaneous tactical calculation. The M10's .50 caliber machine gun remained functional despite the fire consuming the vehicle. From the tank destroyer's position, Murphy had clear fields of fire across the approaching German infantry, while the Panzers couldn't depress their main guns enough to hit him at close range. By using the burning vehicle as a fighting position, Murphy could deliver devastating fire while remaining relatively protected from German tanks. Murphy grabbed the M10's .50 caliber machine gun and opened fire on the approaching German infantry. The heavy machine gun, capable of firing 550 rounds per minute with bullets that could penetrate light armor, cut through the German formation with horrific effectiveness. Soldiers who had been advancing in neat lines suddenly found themselves being killed faster than they could take cover. Murphy fired in controlled bursts, methodically working across the German formation, his years of hunting rabbits translating into devastating accuracy against human targets. The German infantry attempted to flank Murphy's position, sending squads to his left and right, while the Panzers advanced to suppress him with main gun fire. Murphy called artillery strikes on his own position, danger close adjustments that brought high explosive shells within 50 meters of the burning M10. German soldiers caught in the open were torn apart by shell fragments. The Panzers hesitated, their commanders recognizing that advancing further would expose them to American artillery without the infantry support necessary to clear the way. For the next hour, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, alone atop a burning tank destroyer that could explode at any moment, held off an entire German company reinforced with armor. He fired over 900 rounds from the .50 caliber machine gun, directing artillery fire between bursts, killing approximately 50 German soldiers, while wounded in the leg from German fire. Ammunition in the burning M10 exploded around him, sending shrapnel in all directions. Smoke from the fire made breathing difficult and obscured his vision. German soldiers focused their fire on him, recognizing that eliminating the single American was essential to continuing their attack. Oberst Müller watched this display with growing disbelief that transformed into professional respect. The small American soldier he had dismissed as a boy was single-handedly destroying Müller's attack. Every attempt to flank Murphy was met with precisely aimed machine gun fire. Every infantry advance was shattered by cold artillery strikes. The soldiers seemed to know exactly where German forces would appear before they moved, engaging them with devastating accuracy. Müller found himself in the unusual position of admiring an enemy who was killing his men with such efficiency. When the M10's machine gun finally ran out of ammunition, Murphy calmly climbed down from the burning vehicle and walked back to American lines through German fire. Witnesses reported that he walked rather than ran, maintaining calm dignity even as bullets struck the ground around his feet. Once he reached friendly lines, Murphy collapsed from blood loss and shock. Medics discovered he had been wounded in the leg, but had continued fighting for over an hour without acknowledging the injury. The German attack broke. Müller ordered his forces to withdraw, recognizing that American artillery had devastated his infantry and that without infantry support, his panzers were vulnerable. In his after-action report, later captured by American forces, Müller wrote, "Attack halted by artillery and exceptional resistance from small American officer commanding .50 caliber position. Officer displayed courage beyond rationality. Recommend avoiding sector until this officer is neutralized." The German army, which had conquered France in weeks and pushed the Soviet Union back thousands of kilometers, had been stopped by a 165-centimeter Texan who weighed 60 kilograms. Murphy's company suffered 18 casualties during the engagement. German forces suffered over 70 casualties, the majority killed or wounded directly by Murphy's machine gun fire. The Holtzwihr action earned Murphy the Congressional Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration for valor. The citation noted that he stood alone against an entire company of German infantry and 6 Panzer tanks, holding his position for over an hour despite wounds, and while exposed to intense enemy fire. The Battle of Holtzwihr represented the pinnacle of Murphy's combat career, but was merely the most dramatic example of courage he demonstrated throughout the war. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, Murphy had participated in 9 major campaigns, killed approximately 240 enemy soldiers, confirmed through after-action reports with probable kills reaching twice that number, and earned every combat decoration the United States Army could award, including the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 3 Purple Hearts, and numerous other decorations. France awarded him the Croix de Guerre with Palm and the Legion d'Honneur. Belgium awarded him the Belgian Croix de Guerre. He finished the war as the most decorated American combat soldier, a distinction he would retain permanently. The United States has never produced another soldier who earned the same combination of decorations Murphy received. His service demonstrated that physical size has no correlation with combat effectiveness, that courage cannot be judged by appearance, and that the human spirit possesses depths that transcend mere physical attributes. German soldiers who survived encounters with Murphy described him in terms usually reserved for supernatural entities rather than human warriors. A captured Unteroffizier from the 159th Grenadier Division stated during interrogation, "We heard stories about the kleine Offizier. We thought he was propaganda, invented to frighten us. Then we fought against him at Holtzwihr. He killed 8 of my squad, including our sergeant. I watched him shoot through smoke and fire, never missing. He was not human. No human could do what he did." This testimony, preserved in intelligence archives, reflected widespread German recognition that Murphy was an exceptional warrior regardless of his unconventional appearance. The contrast between Murphy's physical appearance and his combat record created cognitive dissonance among everyone who encountered him. General George Patton, who personally awarded Murphy the Medal of Honor, reportedly stared at Murphy for several seconds before stating, "You're the smallest damned hero I've ever seen." Patton meant it as a compliment, recognizing that Murphy had redefined what heroism looked like. The general who commanded America's most aggressive armored army saw in Murphy the pure distillation of warrior spirit unencumbered by physical limitation. Murphy's psychological state after the war revealed the hidden cost of his combat effectiveness. He suffered what we now recognize as severe post-traumatic stress disorder, experiencing nightmares so violent that he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow and once nearly shot his wife during a nightmare-induced panic. He became addicted to sleeping pills, requiring increasingly larger doses to achieve rest. He startled at unexpected sounds. Crowds made him anxious. He could never fully relax, maintaining hypervigilance developed in combat that was useful in war but debilitating in peace. Modern psychiatric understanding recognizes that Murphy's combat effectiveness and post-war struggles were connected. The mental mechanisms that allowed him to function with supernatural clarity under fire, the dissociation, the hypervigilance, the ability to kill without hesitation, couldn't simply be switched off when the war ended. Murphy carried Holtzwihr, Anzio, and dozens of other battles inside his mind for the rest of his life. His willingness to publicly discuss these struggles, unusual for his generation, helped destigmatize what soldiers privately called shell shock and what we now understand as combat trauma. Hollywood discovered Murphy after the war, attracted by his baby face and authentic heroism. His first films cast him as young, innocent characters, which frustrated Murphy because he felt fundamentally disconnected from innocence after witnessing so much death. His breakthrough came when he insisted on portraying himself in To Hell and Back, the film adaptation of his autobiography. Murphy's performance was understated, almost attached, reflecting the emotional numbness combat trauma produced. Critics praised his naturalistic acting, without recognizing they were witnessing dissociation rather than performance technique. The film's combat scenes traumatized Murphy, triggering flashbacks so severe that production stopped multiple times while he recovered his composure. The scene recreating Holtzwihr required weeks to film because Murphy experienced panic attacks when explosions detonated around him. The small American actor had to repeatedly face the burning M10 in his mind, reliving the hour when he held off an entire German company. That he completed the film represented another kind of courage, facing demons that terrified him more than German bullets ever had. Murphy's post-war life demonstrated that surviving combat doesn't mean escaping it. He married twice, the first marriage ending because his wife couldn't endure his violent nightmares and emotional unavailability. His second marriage to Pamela Archer lasted until his death, but was troubled by Murphy's inability to fully connect emotionally. He had business failures, struggled with gambling addiction that stemmed from his need for adrenaline after combat intensity, and was haunted by survivors' guilt over friends who died while he lived. The film's combat scenes traumatized Murphy, triggering flashbacks so severe that production stopped multiple times while he recovered his composure. The scene recreating Holtzwihr required weeks to film because Murphy experienced panic attacks when explosions detonated around him. The small American actor had to repeatedly face the burning M10 in his mind, reliving the hour when he held off an entire German company. That he completed the film represented another kind of courage, facing demons that terrified him more than German bullets ever had. Murphy's post-war life demonstrated that surviving combat doesn't mean escaping it. He married twice, the first marriage ending because his wife couldn't endure his violent nightmares and emotional unavailability. His second marriage to Pamela Archer lasted until his death, but was troubled by Murphy's inability to fully connect emotionally. He had business failures, struggled with gambling addiction that stemmed from his need for adrenaline after combat's intensity, and was haunted by survivors' guilt over friends who died while he lived. Despite these struggles, Murphy used his fame to advocate for veterans suffering combat trauma. He testified before Congress about the psychological wounds of war, openly discussing his own sleeping pill addiction and nightmares at a time when admitting such problems was considered weakness. His willingness to publicly acknowledge that killing 50 men atop a burning tank destroyer had cost beyond physical wounds helped shift public understanding of combat trauma. Veterans who had suffered in silence began seeking help. Knowing that if the most decorated soldier could admit to nightmares, perhaps they weren't weak for experiencing them too. Murphy died May 28, 1971, when the private plane he was traveling in crashed in Virginia. He was 45 years old. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew thousands of mourners, including active duty soldiers, veterans, and civilians who recognized that Murphy embodied the warrior ideal while remaining fundamentally human. The warrior who had killed hundreds of enemy soldiers was remembered equally for his post-war compassion, his advocacy for traumatized veterans, and his honest acknowledgement of war's permanent psychological costs. The grave site became one of Arlington's most visited, second only to President John F. Kennedy's. Veterans leave medals, coins, and handwritten notes at Murphy's headstone, thanking him for service and example. The notes often mention his size, with veterans noting that Murphy proved courage has no physical requirements. A typical note, preserved in Arlington archives, reads, "I was told I was too small to be a Marine. I showed them your story. Thank you for proving them wrong. Semper Fi from a little Marine." German veterans who fought against Murphy occasionally visited his grave in later years, paying respects to an enemy they had learned to respect. One such veteran, who had participated in the Holtzwihr attack as a young soldier, left a note in 1985 that read in German and English, "You were my enemy. You killed my friends. But you were the bravest man I ever saw. Ruhe in Frieden. Rest in peace." This remarkable testimony from a former enemy captured Murphy's paradoxical legacy. He was a devastatingly effective killer who earned respect even from those he fought against. The question of what made Murphy so effective in combat has been analyzed by military historians, psychologists, and tactical experts for decades. His physical advantages were minimal. Lighter weight allowed faster movement, but provided less mass for absorbing recoil and physical impact. His disadvantages seemed overwhelming. Less strength meant difficulty carrying equipment. Less reach meant disadvantage in hand-to-hand combat. Smaller stature made him less physically imposing. Yet Murphy outperformed physically larger soldiers consistently throughout his combat service. Modern understanding suggests multiple factors converge to create Murphy's exceptional combat effectiveness. His childhood poverty and responsibility for siblings developed unusual emotional resilience and high pain tolerance. Years of hunting created marksmanship skills and patience under pressure that formal training couldn't replicate. His slight build forced him to rely on speed, precision, and tactical thinking rather than physical intimidation. Most significantly, Murphy possessed what psychologists now recognize as a rare combination of traits: hypervigilance that activated under stress rather than producing panic, dissociative ability that allowed emotional detachment from violence, and exceptional spatial processing that enabled rapid threat assessment. These traits, which caused severe problems in civilian life, made Murphy extraordinarily effective in combat. The same hypervigilance that made him unable to relax in peacetime allowed him to perceive threats faster than other soldiers in combat. The dissociation that damaged his personal relationships allowed him to kill without hesitation when necessary. The spatial processing that made him restless in routine situations let him identify tactical opportunities instantly under fire. Murphy was, in a sense, neurologically adapted for combat in ways that carried severe peacetime costs. This understanding complicates simplistic narratives about Murphy as a pure hero. He was heroic, his courage is undeniable, his service exemplary. But his effectiveness stemmed partly from psychological mechanisms that caused him suffering throughout his post-war life. The same traits that let him stand atop a burning tank destroyer for an hour, methodically killing 50 enemy soldiers, prevented him from sleeping peacefully decades later. The warrior who seemed fearless in combat lived with fear's consequences until his death. Military training has attempted to replicate Murphy's combat effectiveness through various programs designed to produce similar hypervigilance and controlled dissociation. These attempts generally fail because Murphy's capabilities emerge from childhood trauma and necessity rather than adult training. You cannot teach someone to remain calm under fire by simulating combat. Murphy learned it by hunting when missing meant his siblings when hungry. You cannot train tactical genius through classroom instruction. Murphy developed it through thousands of hours making instant decisions with life or death consequences. The attempted replication of Murphy's abilities reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what made him exceptional. Military institutions want to create soldiers as effective as Murphy was. But Murphy's effectiveness was inseparable from suffering caused by childhood poverty and amplified by combat trauma. Deliberately creating such soldiers will require deliberately traumatizing them, an obviously unethical proposition. Murphy succeeded despite his disadvantages, not because of systematic development of ideal warrior traits. This recognition has shifted modern military psychology away from attempting to create Murphy-like warriors toward better supporting soldiers who develop combat trauma. Murphy's open discussion of his struggles legitimized acknowledging psychological wounds. Current military psychiatric understanding recognizes that combat effectiveness and post-combat trauma are often linked, that warriors who function with supernatural clarity under fire frequently struggle most afterward. The goal isn't creating more soldiers like Murphy, but better supporting soldiers who respond to combat the way Murphy did. Murphy's physical size, which initially seemed his greatest disadvantage, ultimately became irrelevant to his effectiveness and central to his legacy. Had Murphy been 185 centimeters and 85 kilograms, his accomplishments would be remarkable but would lack the narrative power of a 165-centimeter warrior, proving that courage transcends physical attributes. Murphy's story resonates precisely because he defied expectations, because he forced recognition that heroism cannot be judged by appearance. This lesson extends beyond military service into broader cultural understanding of capability and prejudice. Every recruiter who rejected Murphy judged him by appearance rather than capability. They weren't malicious. They were applying conventional wisdom that physical size correlates with combat effectiveness. Murphy proved that conventional wisdom wrong so thoroughly that military recruitment standards were subsequently revised to focus more on psychological resilience and less on physical dimensions. The modern United States military, while maintaining minimum physical standards, explicitly recognizes that combat effectiveness stems primarily from mental rather than physical attributes. This recognition derives directly from Murphy's example and that of other physically unimposing but exceptionally effective warriors. Murphy forced institutional acknowledgement that size matters far less than courage, that physical strength is less important than mental resilience, that appearance provides no reliable indication of capability under stress. Beyond military applications, Murphy's story provides a counter-narrative to persistent cultural assumptions linking physical size with masculine capability. The cultural archetype of male heroism emphasizes physical dominance, the tall, muscular warrior who overpowers enemies through superior strength. Murphy demolished this archetype through demonstrated superiority that had nothing to do with physical dominance. He was small, slight, and baby-faced. He was also the most effective combat soldier America produced. This contradiction between appearance and capability created dissonance that forced re-evaluation of assumptions. If the small Texan could outfight physically larger German soldiers, perhaps size wasn't determinative. If Murphy could earn more decorations than any American soldier while weighing 60 kilograms, perhaps courage couldn't be judged by physical appearance. His example proved that heroism comes in all sizes, that capability cannot be assessed visually, that underestimating someone based on appearance is foolish. Women serving in modern combat roles cite Murphy as precedent, noting that arguments against female combat service often mirror arguments used to exclude Murphy. Claims about physical limitations, concerns about size and strength, assumptions that appearance predicts capability. Murphy proved that size doesn't determine combat effectiveness. His example undermines arguments that physical differences necessarily preclude capability, forcing acknowledgement that combat effectiveness is individual rather than categorical. This broader cultural impact may be Murphy's most enduring legacy. Thousands of soldiers earned valor decorations. None proved so thoroughly that courage transcends physical limitations. Murphy's small stature, initially his greatest disadvantage, became central to his significance. He forced recognition that heroism looks different than Hollywood casting suggests, that the warrior ideal encompasses those who don't fit traditional images. The story that began with 5 rejections from military recruiters ended with Murphy receiving America's highest honors. The recruiters who dismissed him weren't vindictive. They were applying standard criteria that Murphy systematically demonstrated were inadequate. His service proved that physical requirements often exclude capable individuals, while failing to identify those with necessary psychological attributes. Murphy was too small for military service by conventional standards. He was also more effective than soldiers who met those standards. This paradox captures Murphy's essential significance. He succeeded not despite being small, but regardless of being small. His size was irrelevant to what made him exceptional: courage, tactical intelligence, combat clarity, marksmanship, resilience. The military gatekeepers who rejected him confused correlation with causation, assuming that physical size correlated with combat effectiveness strongly enough to use it as a selection criterion. Murphy proved that correlation was weak at best, non-existent at worst. The German soldiers who fought against Murphy learned this lesson through painful experience. Oberst Müller, who initially dismissed Murphy as a boy, watched him destroy a German company. The Unteroffizier who thought Murphy was propaganda watched him kill 8 men in minutes. German intelligence officers who cataloged Murphy's actions recognized that appearance provided no indication of capability. These enemy soldiers, who had every reason to maintain their prejudices, were forced by Murphy's demonstrated effectiveness to acknowledge that they had misjudged him fundamentally. This forced acknowledgement from enemies represents the most compelling validation of Murphy's significance. Allies might praise him from patriotic motivation. His own side might celebrate him to boost morale. But German veterans who admitted Murphy was exceptional despite killing their comrades provided testimony free from nationalistic bias. They acknowledged Murphy's effectiveness because denying it would require denying their own combat experience. Murphy's post-war struggles with trauma and addiction, his nightmares and emotional numbness, his inability to fully escape the war that ended in 1945, humanized his heroism. He wasn't a Superman immune to fear and consequence. He was a human who functioned with exceptional effectiveness during combat, while paying enormous psychological costs afterward. This combination, supernatural competence under fire paired with very human suffering afterward, made Murphy relatable while inspiring. The warrior who stood atop a burning tank destroyer killing 50 enemy soldiers also stood before Congress admitting he needed sleeping pills to rest, that crowds made him anxious, that war had damaged him in ways that wouldn't heal. Both representations were authentic. Murphy was simultaneously the most effective combat soldier and a traumatized veteran struggling with demons. These weren't contradictory identities, but complementary aspects of the same person. His willingness to show both faces, the warrior and the wounded, gave other veterans permission to acknowledge their own trauma. When the most decorated soldier admitted to nightmares, veterans suffering similar symptoms no longer had to hide them. Murphy's advocacy probably helped more soldiers and his combat actions saved, though in less dramatic fashion. His public acknowledgement that killing takes psychological toll, that war's wounds aren't only physical, that warriors suffer from what they witness and do. These admissions shifted cultural understanding of combat trauma profoundly. Today's recognition that post-traumatic stress is a normal response to abnormal experiences rather than a sign of weakness traces directly to Murphy's willingness to discuss his struggles publicly. The therapeutic resources available to modern combat veterans exist partly because Murphy admitted he needed help, legitimizing acknowledgement of psychological wounds. The warrior who proved physical courage had no size requirement also proved that acknowledging psychological wounds wasn't weakness. Murphy died 43 years after the war ended, but never truly left Holtzwihr. The burning M10 stayed in his nightmares. The 50 German soldiers he killed haunted his sleep. The friends who died while he survived created guilt that therapy couldn't fully resolve. He lived with combat's consequences every day of his post-war life. That he managed to build a career, marry, have children,